Every once in a while, there is a really great product that, for whatever reason, just flies under everybody's radar. The Minolta XD is that. So this was Minolta's flagship camera, released in 1977, and it's widely regarded as not only a great camera, but the best manual focus camera that Minolta ever made. It's called by a few different names depending on where it was marketed. It was the XD in Japan, the XD11 in the States, and the XD7 in Europe, but they're all the same. You've also got a black and a silver version. Again, all the same design, just different names and colors. The XD definitely has kind of that 70s SLR styling. I honestly prefer Minolta's later stuff, like their 80s SLRs. I think they're a little bit sleeker, but it is still a really good looking camera, and they're really well built. They're all metal and definitely feel very good in the hand. A lot of people know Minolta for their X700, but that was actually the little brother to the XD. The XD sports all your features that you get on cameras that are made in this era. Mechanical self-timer, exposure compensation control, depth of field preview button, and a bunch of great Minolta lens options. Where this camera really starts to differentiate itself from the competition is in the mode dial. The XD was the first camera ever to have both aperture priority and shutter priority automatic modes. In every other camera up to that point, you just had one or the other. Having both is a seriously underrated feature. Most photographers over time will kind of develop an affinity for either or, and just being able to switch back and forth on the same camera body is so convenient. So I think that's part of why this is such an underrated camera, that it has this feature that not very many other film cameras do. It sadly doesn't have a program auto mode, but the shutter priority mode can actually act as this sort of faux automatic mode. So when you're set to shutter priority mode, if the shutter you set doesn't allow enough light for good exposure, even with a wide open lens, the camera will actually automatically adjust shutter speed to be a little bit longer in order to get a good exposure. And on the flip side, if there's too much light, even with a fully stopped down lens, the camera will automatically adjust your shutter speed to be a little bit faster, again, to make sure you have a proper exposure. This is definitely a unique approach, and I've never really heard of it on any other camera. On later versions of the XD, Minolta actually printed the 1/125th of a second shutter speed option in green, and the idea was if you set everything to green, you were essentially putting the camera in full auto, and were pretty much guaranteed to get a good photo given enough light. So that means that shutter priority on this camera is more or less kind of an idiot-proof mode. Now I think it would have been better if they just had a full program mode instead of this like intelligent shutter priority mode. That being said, I have heard that a lot of photographers actually kind of prefer this just because it gives you a little bit more control than you would in a program mode. But I guess take it as you will, it's kind of up to the individual photographer. I think it would have just been nice to have a program mode. Either way, it is really nice that you kind of have that like set it and forget it option, which is always great, especially for more beginner photographers or those who are kind of more casual shooters. The shutter speed dial does have a few more quirks worth pointing out. You can see that there are two extra options that you don't see on most other cameras, and those are the X and the O settings. X is your flash sync setting. Because of its vertical travel metal shutter design, the XD has a high flash sync of 1/100th of a second, which is even better than most professional cameras of this era, the majority of which feature 1/160th of a second flash sync. And the O setting is a fully mechanical mode. So in the 1970s, a lot of camera manufacturers were moving to a point where not only the meter was operated by battery, but also the shutter. So essentially on most cameras, if you didn't have a battery or if the battery was dead or something like that, then you couldn't actually operate the shutter. This is the same on the XD, except for the fact that the bulb mode and then this O mode is fully mechanical, and it is a set shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. It works whether or not you have batteries in the camera. Now I don't feel like this is a super useful feature, at least for me, but I guess if you are a 70/16 shooter and you don't use your light meter a whole lot, then it definitely could be something that would interest you. And it is nice to have the backup, but again, it's not something personally that I would use a whole lot. The XD is noticeably missing an exposure lock and mirror lockup function, which is too bad. Those are again things that I don't use very often, but it would still be nice to have them. So if you're someone that shoots with those features a lot, I might recommend looking at some other cameras. Okay, now onto my favorite part of this camera, and that is the viewfinder. So if you look into the viewfinder, you can see that you actually have a lot of info at your disposal. Some cameras from this time have issues with not really showing much info in the viewfinder, but with the XD in manual mode, it gives you a full readout of what aperture and shutter speed you're set to, along with a metered shutter speed on the side. In aperture priority, it shows you what aperture you're set to and what shutter speed the camera will use based off the meter. And in shutter priority, it shows you what shutter and aperture you're set to, so you can make sure you're set to the auto aperture. And it shows what aperture the camera will be going with based off of the meter. Now seriously, this is a great feature that I honestly think is the highlight of this camera, because it's kind of lame to shoot without all your info. The fact that I can just shoot, and see everything in the camera is just so nice. especially if you're gonna be using more manual modes or if you're gonna be changing your settings a lot. It's just really lame to have to kind of look up and down. So that's a great feature that I honestly don't know why more cameras didn't have at the time. Like, whatever level you are in photography, it's always nice to have that extra info in there. Also, you have a viewfinder shutter that will prevent any light from coming into the eyepiece for a long exposure. Again, not something I use a lot personally, but still a nice feature to have. And now the biggest reason I recommend this camera is the price. It is so cheap compared to a lot of other cameras in its class. Its closest competitor, the Canon A1, is often double the price of the XD, and they have almost the exact same feature set. So in my mind, the move is just the XD. That being said, maybe it's a good thing that it's underrated because it's so cheap. It's got a great feature set, it's very well made, and it's budget friendly. I think it's a great camera for beginners and experienced photographers alike. So if you're interested in purchasing this camera, please follow the affiliate links that are in the description and the comment section below. They help fund the production of these videos, so if you can use those, it would be much appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.